All right, good evening. We are following a number of breaking news stories right now at 5. 21 people are dead in a shooting at a Texas elementary school that includes 18 children. Those new numbers just coming in moments ago as the death toll from this tragedy continues to rise. That is according to Texas State Senator Roland Gutierrez, who said he was just briefed by Texas State Police. The aftermath of this, you're seeing that on the left side of your screen. Much more on that in a moment, because we've got something else going on locally on the right. An incident here in Portland with a hostage situation on a MAX train. We understand that has now been resolved. This developing late this afternoon near Mount Hood Avenue in Northeast Portland. It is close to Portland Airport. Cascade Station just blocks from the FBI field office, and it prompted a huge police response. So let's bring in Catherine Cook. Catherine, earlier you were talking about police snipers in that area. What's the latest? What are you seeing?
David, it was an incredibly frightening afternoon, but as you said, fortunately the situation has been resolved. Those snipers were trained on a gentleman who was inside the MAX train behind me, holding two people hostage with a knife and a skewer. Those two people were a female MAX operator and a man who was also on board the train. Let's take a look at some video we shot of the arrest just minutes ago. Police say this all started to unfold around 2:18 this afternoon. They got a report of a possible hostage situation here at the Mount Hood Avenue stop on Cascade Parkway. For reference, that's just right here next to the Target at Cascade Station. At that time, there were several people on board. Police were able to respond and get the MAX train cleared, except for the suspect, the male passenger, and the female operator. That female operator told police that at one point the suspect took the male passenger's hand and said, "You're my hostage." Again, he had a knife and a skewer. At one point, police deployed two flashbangs, and it was then that the man was able to give up. They were able to take him into custody, and the other two people on board were safe, not hurt. We spoke with Commander Tina Jones of the Portland Police Bureau earlier. She told us, surprisingly, this was not the first run-in with this suspect they've had this week. Let's take a listen.
Some of our officers recognized him as a subject that we had encountered yesterday, who had been in mental health crisis and who we had a physical encounter with yesterday, and our officers had put on a police officer hold. We learned that he had been held overnight and released today, and then they were encountering him once again at the MAX station.
Back live here at Cascade Station, you can see the MAX train is about to move for the first time in about 3 hours since the incident took place. You can see it heading out now. There have been several delays on the red line because of this, but again, an incredibly relieving situation out here during what could have gone so differently and so tragically. No one was hurt. Suspect is in custody tonight. David, back to you.
Thank God for that. Glad everyone is okay. Catherine, thank you. We want to get to our other breaking story now. Really a horrific scene out of Texas. 21 people killed late this morning in a mass shooting at an elementary school. 18 of those victims are children. Now, 3 adults, including a teenager, also among the dead. Many more hurt, being treated in the hospital. Those numbers still coming in. And police reporting tonight the alleged shooter, an 18-year-old boy, is also dead. Investigators say the shooter opened fire at Robb Elementary School in the small town of Uvalde. That's home to about 16,000 people, about 85 miles west of San Antonio. And tonight that community is hurting and reeling in unimaginable ways in what is the deadliest school shooting in Texas history. The impacts being felt widely across the country too. Now, we do expect President Biden to address the nation from the White House in a few minutes around 5:15 our time. We, of course, will bring you the president live when that happens. Meanwhile, here's NBC's Bree Jackson with the latest from Texas.
Authorities say at least 14 students and 1 teacher are dead, more than a dozen others hospitalized after a shooting at a Texas elementary school.
The suspect did act alone during this heinous crime. Families are being notified.
Authorities identified the gunman as 18-year-old Salvador Ramos. Officials say he abandoned his vehicle, entered the school with a handgun and possibly a rifle. He was later shot and killed by police responding to the shooting.
We're in the process of obtaining detailed background information on the subject, his motive, the types of weapons used, the legal authority to possess them.
This horrific scene happened at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, an area less than 100 miles west of San Antonio. The tragedy comes a week after a mass shooting at a grocery store in Buffalo, New York, and more than a decade after the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School, where more than 24 people were killed, including 20 children. In Washington, Bree Jackson for NBC News.
And I should just briefly correct myself here. The suspect who was shot dead, an 18-year-old man, not a child, but an adult there. KGW and NBC News will continue to cover this tragedy and bring you updates as they come into us. Once again, we are expecting the president to address the nation from the White House about 5:15 our time. We'll bring you the president live when that happens. Stay with us on air and on KGW.com for the latest. All right, let's move to other headlines now. Closing arguments have wrapped up and jury deliberations underway in the murder trial of a local romance novelist. Nancy Crampton Brophy is accused of shooting and killing her husband, Dan, a charge she repeatedly denied when she took the stand in her own defense. Let's bring in Brian Clerkley, who has been covering the trial for 6 weeks now. So, Brian, any word yet on a verdict here?
Hey, David, well, we found out earlier that we won't get a verdict today. The jury will reconvene at 8:45 a.m. tomorrow morning to keep deliberating. And today the state also finished up rebuttals. They were just, prosecutors disputed some of what the defense had said in their closing arguments yesterday. In the last few weeks, we've heard testimony from everyone from law enforcement to friends and family members of the Brophies. The state says Nancy was set to benefit financially from her husband's death in the form of life insurance money. The defense told jurors that the couple was not having financial issues and Nancy loved her husband too much to ever kill him.
Nancy is guilty of murdering her husband, and it is now up to you to deliver the justice for Chef Dan Brophy and the rest of the Brophy family.
If there's any reasonable possibility Nancy Brophy is not guilty, you must give her the benefit of the doubt, and you are required under our system of laws to return a verdict of not guilty.
The state says Crampton Brophy's van was seen on surveillance in the area around the time of the murder. Nancy admitted to driving around the area when she testified, but told jurors several times she did not kill her husband. The judge says a guilty verdict has to be unanimous among the jurors. So we're going to continue following this story, and you can check for updates on air or on our website, kgw.com. Back to you guys.
And of course, we will bring that verdict when it comes down. Thank you, Bryant. Let's move to a story we have been following closely, that ballot issues in Clackamas County. Tens of thousands of them printed with blurry barcodes and the slow and steady effort to transfer each of those votes by hand. The big development tonight, we are hearing from Oregon's Secretary of State. Mike Benner joins us in the newsroom. Mike, you talked to Shamia Fagan. What are her plans here? Could she go so far as to have the state actually take over the counting?
No, David, she cannot. She says that would be a violation of state law. All she can do is provide oversight and support, which she says she's done and is doing. Secretary Fagan says she offered Clackamas County assistance within 24 hours of learning there was a problem. Clackamas County Clerk Sherry Hall declined at first, but has since taken up the secretary on her offer. This is all necessary because of the ballots that went out to voters with barcodes that were either too blurry or too light. Thousands of them. They can't be scanned by machines, so they have to be duplicated by hand, a tedious process. In fact, Clackamas County employees have been reassigned to help with ballot processing. As of last night, more than 57,000 ballots had been processed. About that many still need to be processed. So a lot of work still needs to be done. In the meantime, County Clerk Sherry Hall's competence is being questioned. Secretary Fagan was asked if she'll request Hall's resignation, and here's what she said.
I'm a Clackamas County resident, and obviously I've found this incredibly frustrating and quite frankly just outrageous. And my North Star, though, as Secretary of State for the whole state, is to land this plane. And right now, the only person legally authorized to land this plane under Oregon law is the clerk. And so as long as she's the clerk, I will continue to work directly with her.
All right, Secretary Fagan says this is a very unique situation. In fact, she's reached out to past secretaries of state in Oregon for guidance, and they can't recall something like this ever happening. The secretary says by the end of the day today, she should receive from Clackamas County a plan detailing the timeline for wrapping up ballot processing by June 13th. David?
Still waiting on that timeline there. Okay, Mike Benner, thank you for the update. Now, speaking of names and measures on ballots, for the second time, a judge has rejected a ballot initiative that could have dramatically changed how money is spent on our homeless crisis. Blair Best joins us. Blair, it sounds like even with this latest setback, those behind it aren't backing down here.
That initiative comes from People for Portland. It's a political action group aimed at putting pressure on elected officials to solve homelessness. They've been working on this for several months, yet the court continues to rule it unconstitutional. This all dates back to 2 years ago when voters approved tax on high-income earners that would provide $250 million a year for supportive housing services. This ballot initiative from People for Portland would redirect 75% of that money to building more emergency shelters, as well as enacting no camping laws. But yesterday, the court ruled it unconstitutional, saying it violates Metro Code. This is the second time People for Portland has tried passing this ballot initiative. It's been turned down both times. The group declined to go on camera, but said in a statement, quote, "We're very disappointed in this ruling. It represents a dramatic change in Oregon's initiative system that will limit the ability of the people to have a say in their government." Dan Levy, one of the group's founders, adds, "We're not giving up. We'll find a new and different way to drive change." According to a People for Portland survey, 74% of Portland area voters want existing Metro tax dollars to go toward helping people get off the streets and into shelters. And 75% of voters believe current spending to end homelessness is ineffective.
Shelter doesn't end homelessness. People are still homeless in shelter.
Metro welcomes the court's decision, saying they believe the voter-approved supportive housing service fund has already been working without this initiative.
In the first 9 months alone, the program has, first of all, created hundreds of shelter beds, has helped over 700 individuals out of homelessness and into housing, and have supported over 2,500 households by avoiding homelessness and keeping their housing to begin with rent assistance.
Nonprofits focused on finding permanent housing for the homeless also feel this ruling is a win for the city.
The centerpiece of this initiative, calling for 75% of funds to be spent on shelter, was the wrong direction from our over 53 years of experience providing services to vulnerable people, particularly housing services. Shelter is a part of the continuum, but it is not the answer to housing. Shelter is not housing. Shelter is shelter.
As for what's next, well, People for Portland isn't backing down, so it's back to the drawing board for them. They plan to look at their legal options and find new ways to get more people into shelters.
And that is the bottom line there. Thank you, Blair. We'll